The Geometry Dash level editor is a very powerful editor. It's arguably one of, if not the best level editor out there in any game. Creators have managed to make so many amazing levels, not only visually, but technically as well. However, like with any complex editor, there's a steep learning curve. Over the years, there have been a lot of new triggers added, as well as old triggers getting updated, so deciding to learn them can be quite a big and scary leap to take. Creation is a joy, and that's why I'm creating this 4-part series, going over all of the triggers in Geometry Dash, and explaining how they work. If you're here to look for a specific trigger, you can see in this image roughly how I've separated triggers into different levels. Some triggers are in multiple levels due to the base feature being simple, but the trigger having more complex optional settings. There are also chapters in this video, so you can find exactly the trigger you're looking for. In the beginner section, we're going over the most simple triggers that can be used by themselves. In the following sections, we'll go over more complicated triggers and how we can use them in tandem with other triggers. The expert section will have some complex triggers, but it's mostly reserved for how you can make complex systems. Before we even start with triggers, we must understand how group IDs work in the game. Whenever you select an object or multiple objects, you can press the Edit Group button on the right to open up a menu. In the middle, we can add group IDs to the selected objects by typing in a number or pressing the arrows. We can also press the next free button to automatically find the lowest group ID that is not used in the level yet. We can then press Add to add the group ID to the object. Underneath, we can see that the number 1 pops up, which means that this object now has group ID 1 assigned to it. Any trigger using the group ID 1 will now affect this object. By clicking on the ID, we can remove it from the selected object. If you have multiple objects selected, the ID can turn blue. This means that the ID is assigned to at least one, but not all of the selected objects. You can add or remove groups just like with one object selected. Now we're ready to tackle the triggers. There are a couple settings for all of the triggers that change when and how they are activated. While having a trigger selected, you can press the Edit Object Group to open up the triggers menu. In the menu, you will always see a checkbox for Touch Trigger and Spawn Trigger. If the Edit Object menu is used for colors, this menu is opened by the Edit Special button instead. You can also select multiple different kinds of triggers to change these settings simultaneously. If either of these are ticked on, you will get another checkbox for multi-trigger, which lets the trigger to be activated multiple times. We'll talk about Spawn Trigger in the next episode, but we'll go over the other options soon. Let's take the move trigger as an example. For now, all you need to know is that this trigger moves a given group ID. I've set up an example here where we have a hexagon and a move trigger that will move it up by 1 block. If we play the level, the hexagon starts moving once we pass the X position where the trigger was placed. Now, ticking on the touch trigger option will only move it if we touch the hitbox of this trigger. The hitbox is the cyan square around the trigger. Here, you can see it works just as before when we jump and hit it, but not jumping will cause the hexagon not to move. Now, let's make this trigger multi-trigger and see what happens. Now every time we jump and hit the trigger, the hexagon will move up by 1 block. Now onto the triggers. We'll start off with simpler triggers and work our way up. The ghost trail triggers are used to enable and disable the ghost trail of the player. They have no unique options, so you can just place them and that's it. The show and hide icon triggers hide or show the player. Even if the player is hidden, the ghost trail will still be visible if it's enabled. Similar to the ghost trail trigger, this one has no unique options. Background effect triggers also have no unique options. They disable and enable the particles in the background in these 4 game modes. These 3 change triggers are used to change the background, ground and middle ground during the level. You can simply press the icon in the middle and choose the new one you want to use. The enter effect triggers change how the objects enter and exit the screen. Normally, they will fade into the screen and then fade out. With these triggers, you can change that in different ways. You can see on the screen some of these triggers at work. These work as is, but there are some extra options in the trigger menu. We'll talk about the enter channel in another episode, but keep it in mind. Enter and exit only options will make the trigger only affect the entering objects on the right side of the screen or the exiting objects on the left. You can have a different effect for enter and exit active at once. The time warp trigger will change the speed of the game. You can set it between 0.1 and 2. The gravity trigger changes the gravity of the player. You can set this one between 0.1 and 2 as well. All of the other options are used for 2-player mode. You can select P1 or P2 to change only one player's gravity, or PT to change the gravity of the player that touches the trigger. For the last option, you'll need to use touch trigger. The toggle trigger changes the active state of objects. When an object is toggled off, it will not be visible or interactable. This means if a wall is toggled off, you can walk right past it. This one simply takes the group ID and you can choose whether to activate it or deactivate it. Based on this, the color of the toggle trigger changes, so it's easier to manage in the editor. The toggle orb and the toggle block are interactable objects that toggle a group just like the toggle trigger. The toggle orb menu can be accessed by pressing the edit special button. They both have the exact same options though. Apart from changing the state of the group, we also have options for claim touch, no multi-activate, and spawn only. Claim touch will disable the player from jumping when pressing the toggle orb or block. If it's not ticked on, you will both toggle a group and jump at the same time. No multi-activate means the trigger cannot be used multiple times. Spawn only will make sense after the next episode. Unlike the toggle trigger, the alpha trigger will only change the opacity of the objects, but they will still be interactable. We select a group to change the opacity of. We can change the fade time, which is how long it takes for the group to change to the new alpha value, and the opacity slider, which changes how opaque the group should be. 1 being fully opaque and 0 being fully transparent. The animate trigger can be used to change the animation of these 3 monsters. You can also start the animation of most of the animated objects in this tab. Group ID is the object you want to animate. For the animated objects, press Edit Special and tick Animate on Trigger. After that, they will stop animating until an animate trigger is activated on them. Animation ID is only used for the monsters. You can see what each one does if you press the I button on the top left. All triggers have this button, and I'd recommend checking it if you don't remember some setting for a trigger. For a more thorough explanation for everything, you can open the pause menu and press this button to open up the official documentation for triggers. Now we'll get into slightly more advanced triggers. We'll start off with the move trigger. This is used to move objects. There are a lot of options here, but we'll only go over these very basics in this part of the tutorial. The rest will be explained in the next part. In the bottom right, we can choose a target group ID. This is the group of objects we want to move. Move time is simply how long the movement takes in seconds. It goes up to 10 with the slider, but any number can be manually typed in. This is going to be the case for almost every box where we can type numbers, so I won't be mentioning it after this. Next up, the easing. This changes the way the movement happens. If none is selected, the object will move linearly. This is what all of the different options look like. Feel free to pause or come back later to find an easing that fits your movement. For all of the curious peeps, this is what all of the formulas are for the movements. Huge thank you to HDanke for this and other details here and there throughout this tutorial. I'd also like to thank my channel members, Notmorco, Pyro Burnham, Metagray, and Sudasudesu. Your support means a lot to me. Now, to actually move the objects, we use the move X and move Y options. X is the horizontal and Y is the vertical movement. 10 units is 1 grid length in the editor. Checking the small step option changes the units to be 30 per grid instead of 10. It can be useful for very small movements. There are also options to lock the movement to the player's or the camera's movement. This will change the move option to change to mod. This simply multiplies the movement. So at 2, the object will move at twice the speed of the player, and 0.5 will halve the movement. We can also set the move time to -1, which will make the movement infinite. This is only really useful when we have the object locked to either the player or the camera. The follow trigger is similar to the move trigger with the lock enabled. The X and Y mod multiply the movement just like in the move trigger. We cannot set the move time to -1 here because Croptop forgot, I guess, but we can set it to 9999, which is almost 3 hours. In the bottom right, we have the target group ID, which is the object we want to move according to another object. The follow group ID is the object that the target group will follow. This can only be a single object or a parent, but we'll talk about that in another episode. The follow player Y trigger makes an object follow the player's Y position, as the name suggests. If multiple objects are in this group, they will all get flattened to the player's Y position. Similarly to the previous triggers and most of the upcoming triggers, we have move time and target group ID, so I won't be mentioning them anymore after this. Speed is not actually the speed of the object, but seems to be some sort of a smoothing function. At 1, it will follow the player's movement nearly perfectly. As you move the values closer to 0, it starts moving slower as it gets closer to the player's position. Delay is how long it takes for the object to start moving after the player moves, in seconds. Offset changes how high or low the object will follow from the player, 10 being 1 block above and -10 1 block below. Max speed limits the max speed the object can move. Setting it to 0 means there's no max speed. 0.5 is 1 block per second. I don't know why, but that's just how it is. Advanced follow is one of the new triggers added in 2.2. It's an advanced version of the follow trigger. For a lot of the new triggers, group ID is shortened to GID, so target GID is a target group ID. These are the options we'll be going over in this video. The rest we'll handle in the expert section. We can set another group to follow, which has to be a single object or a parent. There are options to follow only X or Y position. There are also options to follow player 1, player 2, and the center of the screen, which is not actually the center, but the bottom left corner of the screen. Hopefully, this will be fixed in a later update. Once this trigger is activated, the object will teleport to the target instead of keeping the distance at the time of activation. This is a key difference between the advanced follow and the regular follow. The scale trigger is used to change the size of objects. We won't go over these two options in this video. We can choose the group we want to change the size of and the center point of the effect. The center should be either a single object or a parent. If you set it to 0, all of the objects in the target group will use their own center. Here's how the center position can affect the scaling. Now for the actual scaling though. Scale X changes the X size of the object and scale Y the Y size. If an object is rotated 90 degrees, scale X will still scale the vertical axis. Diff by value means dividing, and it can be used to easily scale an object back. If you scale to 10x size and then divide by 10x, the object will be back to its original size. Only move disables the scaling and moves the objects based on how they would move without this option. The rotate trigger rotates objects. We'll go over these options in this part. Target group ID is the object you want to rotate, and center group ID is the object or parent you want to rotate the target around. Like in scale trigger, the center can be 0 to make it rotate around itself. Degrees is how many degrees it will rotate, 360 being one full rotation. Alternatively, you can also use the X360 option to choose how many full rotations the object does. You can use both as well. Positive values go clockwise and negative values go counterclockwise. Locking object rotation will keep the rotation while moving around the center. The reverse trigger changes the direction the player is going. You kinda have to use touch or spawn trigger on it, otherwise you'll never go back the normal way. It's also a worse version of the rotate gameplay trigger, but that one will be in the advanced section. The shake trigger will shake the screen. Strength is how much the screen shakes, interval is how often the screen's position will change, and duration is how long the entire shake will last. Strength is capped at 100 and interval at 0.2. Here you can see interval 0 on top and interval 0.2 on bottom. The teleport, portal, orb and trigger all have the exact same options. There's a lot, but we'll go over these today. Target group ID is the object you want to teleport to. If there are multiple objects in that group, it will randomly teleport to one of them, even with a parent. If it's set to 0, it will teleport the player in place. This can be useful in ways we'll talk about in the next part. In the gravity section, we can force the player to be either normal or flipped gravity. But alternatively, we can use toggle to change the opposite gravity. The orb and portal have an option for multi-activates, which means we can use them multiple times. The end trigger is used to end the level early in classic mode. In platformer mode, it's required to beat the level. target pos is where the player will move to once the end trigger is activated. This should be either a single object or a parent. No effects removes the rays coming out of the goal. No SFX removes the usual sound effects. And instant removes the animation of the icon getting pulled into the goal. Here you can see them with all ticked on and with none ticked. You might be curious about this spawn ID. It can be used to activate another trigger. But spawning is something we'll go over in the next episode, and it's what makes triggers so amazing. The checkpoint is a trigger that only works in platformer mode. It allows the player to respawn partway through the level instead of the beginning. We'll go over these options here. You can keep all of it as is and it will work just fine. Alternatively, you can change target pos to change where the player will respawn. 0 is the position of the checkpoint itself. You can tick player pos to respawn at the position the player was when the checkpoint was reached. This is more useful when spawning the checkpoint, but we'll get to that in the next episode. Multi-trigger allows the checkpoint to be reached multiple times. And now for the last trigger in the beginner section, the start position. This is a help trigger that's made to help test later parts of the level without the need to start from the beginning every time. The player will spawn at this trigger. The target order is used to determine which start position to spawn at if multiple are placed. The farthest and the highest target order is used. You can change the starting speed and mode. In the options, you can change more things about the game mode and direction the player goes. This is what all of the options correspond to. Feel free to pause here. Back on the main trigger menu, you can also tick disable to disable the start pos. This way you can just enable it again instead of placing a new one and changing the settings every time. Target channel is used for rotating gameplay, so you can choose the correct channel. That's something we'll go over in the advanced section though. Reset camera resets these 4 camera triggers, which is something we'll go over in the next section. That's gonna be it. Thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful and stay tuned for the intermediate section. I'll see you guys next blue moon. Bye bye.